It was a sorrowful day in Town City because the night before, news anchor John Ernest reported the distressing story of how Rufus the Runt's treasure was stolen. Rufus the Runt was a 15th century pirate who buried his treasure in what would become Town City. This treasure was presumed lost until Joe on a beach trip with Skallow found a bottle with a map contained within it. After a little investigating helped by Major Nick, they discovered the treasure was right under their very noses in Skallow's backyard. This discovery attracted many eyes, but not all were honest, resulting in its theft. The day after the report, Skallow, Joe, Robo, Major Nick Thompson and the bodyguard hurried to Town City's National Museum to see how they could help, since it was their discovery after all. The museum was surrounded by countless police cars and officers, multiple helicopters hovering around the building and grounds, and every entrance was barricaded and sealed with police tape. As the five pulled up, an officer approached them at the gate and asked about their business. Major Nick began to explain, but before he could finish, the officer recognized him and asked him to follow her. He led them past all the security through the front entrance into the scene of the crime. Not much had changed since the report. The chest display case was still circled with police tape, and detectives scattered around the exhibit searching for clues. The officer brought them to the sergeant and senior detectives stationed on the case, and reported, "Sergeant Ball, the other witnesses you required have arrived." "Perfect timing. Detective Bobby will now continue his investigation. That will be all," responded Sergeant Ball. The officer then returned to her post. To begin his questioning, Detective Bobby asked Dr. Atlas about the museum's placement of cameras, the display security, individuals involved in the project, and other such things. Dr. Atlas explained each as best she could, and Detective Bobby continued by interrogating Dr. Atlas and the five on potential subjects. Dr. Atlas had none, but Skallow and Joe did. They stated their case. "We suspect Scorpio Strangles and the Wizard of Doom are behind this, mainly because of them vowing revenge following our previous encounter in Egypt. Our theory being that sometime during the day of the theft, the three disguised themselves as tourists, wearing some inconspicuous outfits and scouting out the exhibit, planning their crime. This helps prove why nothing else other than the treasure was touched. Around 9 o'clock, like stated in the report, we figure they teleported themselves to the exhibit, removing the treasure in a similar manner. We also presume they made themselves invisible to commit the crime. All this evidence supports that none of the cameras caught anything until the act, and none of the security systems were triggered during that time. From this we conclude that Scorpio Strangles and the Wizard of Doom are the most likely suspects in this case." Detective Bobby noted down their story and asked one very important question. "Very interesting. Last question. What do you make of the only clue left at the scene? The riddle," showing Skallow and Joe and the others, including Dr. Atlas, a reproduction of the clue, which said, "If you want your artifact back, come alone to the place where one gets milk, bread, and a quick snack. Next to the green dumpster at the building's rear is where your artifact is at. Signed with the initials WOD." They each looked it over carefully one by one, each taking their time, trying to discern its secret, after which each gave their conclusion. Thompson and the bodyguard, "A grocery store. We think a grocery store has all can be bought there, and the green dumpster refers to where the veggies are kept, because veggies are called greens, and their display looks like a dumpster." Dr. Atlas and Major Nick, "A gas station. We believe their answer is a gas station, since you too can acquire milk, bread, and a snack. The green dumpster part is a metaphoric reference to the non-environmentally friendly vehicles that use its petrol services." Joe and Skallow, "A convenience store. We say a convenience store, a place where milk and bread is sold, but mostly used to grab a quick snack when out and about. The green dumpster part of the riddle we believe isn't metaphoric, but literal. There's a convenience store near us named the Gold Oak, that has a very striking green dumpster around its back, more striking than any dumpster we've ever seen." Detective Bobby was extremely interested in Skallow and Joe's answer due to their abnormal certainty. "I would like to investigate this further," decided Detective Bobby. "Would you lead me there?" Skallow and Joe agreed. Detective Bobby then offered the others to join them, all with the permission of his supervisor, Sergeant Ball. Sergeant Ball accepted his request and dismissed him from his post. Dr. Atlas declined as she had work to complete at the museum involving the case. But before they could leave, a thought struck Thompson. "Didn't the riddle say to come alone?" exclaimed Thompson. "Good point. What do you think we should do, Detective Bobby?" asked Major Nick. "We will continue as planned," replied Detective Bobby, "but we'll send one of us to check out the dumpster while the rest of us hide and keep watch from afar." Later that day, when the six and Detective Bobby approached their location, they stopped to decide who would search the area. After much discussion, it was decided that Rover would go and sniff out what he could find. To get him started, Detective Bobby gave him a good sniff of the original clue. Then the rest positioned themselves behind a large fallen log settled on top of a small cliff overlooking the Gold Oak. They peered over the log and watched Robo while he followed the scent trail towards the dumpster. "You are right about the greed dumpster. Let's see if your theory is right," said Detective Bobby. Robo sniffed round the dumpster and found something. Carrying it in his mouth, he hurried back to the others. "You found something," remarked Skallow, "but it's not the treasure." Major Nick Thompson and the bodyguard were disheartened. Detective Bobby was frustrated, and Joe was confused. "Where's the treasure? Everything lined up. The place, the dumpster, everything. Where is it?" "Relax. Keep calm," reassured Detective Bobby. He continued, "What has Robo returned with, Skallow?" Skallow took the note, opened it, and read it. "Not so fast. Here's your next task. Riddle me this. Name the place with the most stories in the district. Let only one come, lest our journey be done. Artifact be pinned. Signed with the same initials as the first, W.O.D. "Another riddle just like before," concluded Skallow. "Any thoughts?" added Detective Bobby. "That new office building downtown is quite tall," stated the bodyguard. "The museum fits too, but I doubt it, since we've just been there," answered Major Nick. "I don't believe either are right. I believe the answer is a library," debated Thompson. "I don't think the stories are referring to building heights. I think the stories are referring to books, because a library has an uncountable number of books, full of stories of all kinds. I'd say the most in the district." All agreed with Thompson. Following this, Detective Bobby had an announcement. He announced, "From here onwards I will not continue with you on foot. You can see this undertaking has taken an unexpected turn, as we thought after this our journey would be finished. I've had a task to complete back at the museum involving this case, and we do not know how long this trail will last," he continued. "However, you may continue yourselves, and I will deputize one of you as a detective who will report your findings to me. After much thought, I've decided to bestow the responsibility onto Major Nick. Will you accept?" Major Nick was flattered and checked with the others. All were very excited and agreed he was the best for the job. Major Nick humbly accepted and took the oath to finalize the process. Detective Bobby then left him and returned to the museum. The following day, Major Nick led the others back on the trail to their next location, the Town City National Library, decided on the way due to its extensive collection of stories, the most in the district. Also decided on the way was where to look, as the clue wasn't clear. Again, it was Thompson who cracked the code, stating, "I believe the place with the most stories part isn't alluding to a building, but also the position of what we will find. From this I say the history section is where to look. In a book, at this stage I cannot determine." Thompson was given the honour of searching the area following this speech, since he seemed to know the most about it. While the others waited outside, Thompson entered and advanced to the history section. He searched the shelves for a book that stood out for a good amount of time before spotting an encyclopedia. The encyclopedia was the 10th in its series. Chapter 10 was about lost treasures, and page 10 was about one treasure that had been found. All these 10s were written in Roman numerals, which Thompson took as a sign. Sandwiched between page 10 and 11 was an envelope. Thompson took it and slipped it into his jeans' right pocket, hiding his prize as best he could. He put the book back and left the scene to continue his investigation in a less secretive way. Returning to the others, Thompson showed them what he had acquired. He opened the envelope and read what was inside. "The place where you can send a message without using your voice. Where is this? Only one may enter. Your artifact will be there." Again signed W.O.D. Afterwards, everyone gave their answer. The bodyguard's response was the best. It went like this: "A post office is the obvious answer. The send a message without using your voice part is talking about a letter, because you do not speak to the recipient of a letter in speech, but in writing." Following which, the others assigned the bodyguard with the task of collecting what was there. However, the clue hadn't indicated a specific post office to search for. The five decided to search the post office in their local area as a start. On their way, the bodyguard spotted a post office not far from the library. This was significant due to the building's address being 1675. Same as the year Ruffus and crew arrived at Town City. This post office exterior also stood out due to its uncanny resemblance to a treasure chest. The outlining trim was constructed with a different type and colour concrete than the rest of the building. 3/4 up from the ground, a 10-inch rectangle concrete slab, the same as the trimming, was stretched across the building from left to right, mimicking the chest lid and body. A small diamond-shaped piece of concrete located directly under the centre of the divider, made of the same concrete as the others, impersonating the lock. "Found it, I think," uttered the bodyguard. "Where?" exclaimed Joe in response. "That post office we just passed," uttered the bodyguard. Major Nick turned his truck round and headed back. Arriving, the bodyguard got out and went to enter, but Looking to his right, saw a postbox placed close to the edge of the pavement, thinking to himself, is that what they meant? He sniffed round it, nothing. He opened its drawer and taped the inside was an envelope. The bodyguard snatched the envelope and rushed back to the others and opened it. It read, what do all these things have in common? Bill, chocolate, code, crow, handle, maid, and music. What does this note have in common with the rest? Only one to collect the artifact. Signed W.O.D. once again. Everyone fought on the clue for a good solid hour, maybe two. Regrouping, they discussed their theories, which didn't last long, as no one had deciphered anything except Major Nick. Major Nick had determined that each word was alluding to a single common word. Not only that, but the words also hinted at what and where to look. All this helped him to conclude the location as a bar. More specifically, the Bell and Crow, where a code is given to a barmaid who directs you to a chocolate-coloured musical instrument. Major Nick's immense understanding of the clue convinced the others to nominate him as the man to complete this task, also because he was the oldest. That night the five pulled up at the Bell and Crow, satisfying both Bell and Crow. Major Nick entered the establishment and cast round for an answer to the code part of the investigation, but came up with nothing. He wondered what this code was, so he decided to check the menu for any ideas. He explored the menu to see if this could help him, and it could. He spotted a cocktail called a banana runt, which stood out to him not just because of the runt part, a direct connection to Rough as the Runt, and the banana part, a connection to the handle segment of the clue, as handlebars have a close resemblance to a banana. Major determined that this must be it, so he gave it a try. He called the barmaid over and ordered the banana runt cocktail, again satisfying both maid and code. The barmaid stared at Major Nick and said, "You're the one they were expecting. Follow me." She led him to their music stage, past a very interesting and unusually placed statue. There she brought him to their chocolate-coloured piano, ticking the boxes of chocolate and music, and opened its stall. Moving a couple pages of old sheet music, uncovered an envelope. She gave it to Major Nick and resumed her duties. Major Nick stored it in his jacket's right interior pocket and gave the barmaid a tip before leaving. Major Nick returned to the others, opened the envelope and read the note it contained. What do you put one thing in and another comes out? Only one is allowed to come, as any more would be improper. Signed W.O.D. like all the other times. There was also something else included, a card. An FPOS card? Everyone was confused since it didn't resemble any card they'd ever seen. It was made of wood and had no details, unlike others that were made of plastic and full of personal details. The only reason they came to this conclusion was because of its size and shape, which aligned with all the cards each had in their wallet. Amidst all this confusion, Major Nick spoke up and said, "Let's leave it for tonight. It's getting late. Let's go home and get some rest and try again in the morning." The next morning they regrouped at Skallow's place to continue their discussion from the night before. All had pondered the issue throughout the night and were here to share their findings. The five gave their takes one by one, but none seemed to stick, until it came to Skallow. Skallow's interpretation went like this. I was thinking about this all night, and during which I had a dream about the old Blue Whale restaurant near Shore Cove. I remembered that it had an ATM machine outside the door. Not sure if it's working, but could be worth a try. Joe agreed, replying, "Why not? We have no other ideas." And the rest did too, so they went to find out. Skallow walked to the ATM machine outside the door, just like he said. He took the card and inserted it into the machine. Nothing happened. The clue did not say what to do next, and the envelope only held the note and card. So he thought. He looked beyond the clue and noticed the connections. Blue whale, an object made of wood, and this object disappearing forever. Skallow remembered Dr. Atlas's first interview with John Ernest, where she discussed the sinking of the Blue Whale, Rough as the Runt ship, and the date she stated, 1678. Skallow typed this hoping it would work. It did. The screen then showed a single and unusual request, withdraw Riddle. He selected it, and where money is usually dispensed, an envelope appeared instead, so he picked it up and joined the rest. Skallow opened the envelope, took out the note and read it. Last one, return to where this whole journey began. Attendance the same as the others. 1. Signed W.O.D. again. This note left them confused. Only two places fit. The spot on Shore Cove where Joe found the bottle, or the museum. But the clue gave no hint to which. Like always, Major Nick had the answer they needed. He determined the hole was the hint, and Shore Cove was the location. He also nominated Joe to complete the task as he discovered the bottle and started this whole adventure. All agreed and Joe accepted. Majonek then asked Joe, "Do you remember where on Shore Cove you found the bottle, the exact location?" "I don't think I could ever forget," Joe confidently replied. Joe paced out the path to the location when they arrived at Shore Cove. Coming to the spot, Joe kneeled down and started digging with his hands. Not long after, he unearthed the bottle with something in it. He returned with it to the others and opened it. The bottle had a cap, not a cork like last time, and read what was inside. "Look behind you." They turned and saw Scorpio Strangles and the Wizard of Doom standing there. "Where's the treasure?" demanded Joe. Detective Bobby, who had joined them for the final clue, intervened. "As a deputized member of the law, I order you under Section 9 to return the artifact in question," showing his badge. The three laughed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," the Wizard of Doom scoffed in response, before teleporting all to their castle. They appeared in the throne room. The Wizard of Doom sat smugly on his throne, with Scorpio and Strangles at his left and right. The others were standing in the court quite a distance from the throne, and the chest placed an equal distance between both. Joe rushed for the chest, but was stopped by an invisible barrier which bounced him back. Detective Bobby tried to intervene again, yet was persuaded by Skallow to let him handle it. Skallow spoke up. "What do you want in exchange for the chest?" "You. We want revenge for what you and Joe did in Egypt, the defeat we faced because of you," retorted the Wizard of Doom. "Why steal the treasure?" added Joe, picking himself up. "To bring you to us. We saw you following this wild goose chase repeatedly, hoping each clue would lead to your precious artifact until you fell right into our trap," retorted the Wizard of Doom again. Detective Bobby challenged the Wizard of Doom. "You're telling me you caused all this trouble, taking many officers off their regular duties, wasted everyone's time and all these resources just for your silly desire for revenge?" "You will see how silly our revenge will be," smirked the Wizard of Doom. Throughout all this debating, Robo had been sniffing around the room. During his travels he discovered an off-coloured stone. Pressing it with his nose unlocked a small secret door just big enough to enter. He followed the trail. It led and emerged out a crescent-shaped opening above the Wizard of Doom, Scorpio, and Strangles. Skallow, Joe, and the others had all spotted Robo, but made sure not to let the enemy know. The Wizard of Doom stood up and lifted his magic staff. As the crystal on its head began to sparkle, Robo leaped from his tactical position and landed on the Wizard of Doom, knocking him to the ground, dropping his staff and smashing the crystal as a result. The barriers between the treasure and the three vanished. Everyone rushed Scorpio and Strangles. Both tried to flee but were overwhelmed by the bodyguard. The two deputized officers, Majonek and Detective Bobby, with Robo, arrested the three, and Skallow, Joe, and Thompson secured the treasure. "Damn you, Skallow and Joe," the Wizard of Doom growled in defeat. Rufus the Runch's treasure had been saved. The troops, their prisoners, and their prize were teleported safely back to Town City using an incantation, delivered under protest by the Wizard of Doom. Scorpio, Strangles, and the Wizard of Doom were locked up tightly behind bars, where they would stay, for now. Skallow, Joe, Robo, Majonek, Thompson, the bodyguard, and Detective Bobby returned with their treasure to a congratulatory welcome from Dr. Atlas, Sergeant Bull, and the rest of Town City. The rescue was concluded with a report by John Ernest and Detective Bobby's promotion to Sergeant. Rufus the Runch's treasure was now securely displayed in its rightful place at Town City's National Museum, where it would now stay undisturbed for generations upon generations to come.